Hello and welcome to this week's episode of QTV. Wow, have we got a fantastic program coming up.
First off, we'll be analysing the life of Rock Hudson.
Then it's off to the Midsumma Carnival for all the fun of the dog show.
Janet Jukes talks to us all about our relationships and why they really matter.
Our Moments in Time series remembers St. Peter's Anglican Church in East Melbourne that welcomed its gay and lesbian parishioners at a time when most of the world was hostile.
Rock Hudson is not gay. Rock Hudson is not a homosexual. Rock Hudson has nothing to do with the gay liberation movement. That is what I was told by one of the publicists at Universal Studios in 1972 when I approached them about possibly interviewing Rock Hudson, who was at that time starring in a series, hugely successful series, called Macmillan and Wife. Now, I had sent in some of my articles, which I'd written for She magazine in Britain, and one of the articles was on the Gay Liberation Front in Great Britain. This caused an absolute heart attack among the executives in Universal Studios because no one was supposed to know that Rock Hudson was even possibly 1% gay, let alone possibly 90%. So this man said I was not to approach them ever again to do an article or an interview with Rock Hudson because Rock Hudson was not gay. I, of course, had not mentioned the fact that I thought Rock Hudson was gay. I just sent in one of my articles. Anyway, a week later, I was at MGM Studios. It was October 1972, and a week later, some of their most precious and nostalgic standing sets were going to be demolished to make way for, I don't know, a shopping centre or a car park. I went into the publicity office and lo and behold, it seemed to be populated entirely by gay men. So I mentioned what had happened about Rock Hudson and the heart palpitations that had occurred. And they said, oh, but Rock, he was making a film here last month. He's really a cool guy. He was so easygoing. He'd love to see you, love to see you. So a couple of days later, I was packing to return to England, and Rock's agent, friend, lover, question mark, rang and said, hi, it's Tom. Hey, Rock would love to meet with you. He's heard a lot about you, love you to come over. And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm leaving on a plane. And that was the end of my chance to meet Rock Hudson. Many, many years later, like now, I'm holding this book. It's called Rock Hudson's Erotic Fire. And my God, is it fiery and is it erotic? Because he slept with him, her, and him, her. Every page seems to have some new sexual encounter. How he got the energy. I mean, I've got to spend time, reading books like War and Peace. I haven't got time to have all these amazing affairs, but Rock obviously did. So I didn't get to meet Rock. I had to wait all this time to find out that yes, Rock was gay, he was homosexual, and no, he didn't have any links with the Gay Liberation Front. But later, many years later, he did meet Armistead Mopan, and they did have a little fling, and he, of course, appears fictionally in Tales of the City, or rather its sequel, More Tales of the City, as a very closeted movie star. But if you want to find out more about Rock, you could go no further than this book. It could, of course, be a pack of lies, couldn't it? It could be written by these gay liberationists that see homosexuality in every single thing. But anyway, good on you, Rock. If you enjoyed your life, I'm happy for you. Shame we didn't get to meet. We nearly did. And who knows what erotic fire might have been kindled if we had.
Coming up next, we've got all the magic of the Midsumma Carnival, and it wouldn't be Midsumma Carnival if we didn't have that beautiful dog show. Take a look at this.
My darling. Making eye contact with everybody. Freya, let's see what you got. Freya's got a little bit of a tutu on today. So Frankie, take the stage. Give it up to Ella. Give it up for Frida.
Together we are raising funds for Australian wildlife, so check us out on Instagram.
There you are. That's good. Oh, yeah. Give it up for Let me see it. Keep it up. Like a bunch of superheroes. Yeah. Our last entrant, folks.
Ella is the winner.
Give it up for Zach. Bowie. Oh, sorry.
He's already trying to ruin every girl backstage, so I think he started pretty
Spinning is what we're saying. Amazing. Let me see Bowie do a little spin on the dog walk. Give it up for Bowie. Give it up for Charlie. Thank you. Little thank you. Yes, Charlie. I think I want to do. Give it a whirl. Now we're going on the leash and we're crunching. Should we see Archie do a little swirl on the catwalk? Yes, Archie! Let's see Nigel! Please, Francis Bosco! Can we see Frankie do some tricks? Give it up for Bear! He's 3 months old. I can see everyone's face going like this. Collectively, that was stunning. Can we see Spartan on the dog walk? Give it up! France on the dog walk. Yeah, oh. Give it up for Ashley! Give it up for Holly the Biker. What are you gonna do, Holly? Yeah.
The winner is Bosco.
Coming up next is Janet Jukes, who spoke on Joy 94.9's Saturday Magazine. Then we'll remember the welcoming arms of St. Peter's Anglican Church.
Relationships Matter have recently achieved the Rainbow Tick accreditation. So we've asked Jan to come and talk to us all about that. Before we kick off the conversation about Rainbow Tick accreditation, tell us about Relationships Matter.
So
You've changed your name.
We have. So we were LifeWorks, Relationships Counselling and Education Services.
That's a mouthful.
Which is a bit of a mouthful. So we went through this process and we talked to a whole lot of people, including people in the LGBTIQ community, and talked about, what do you value about us as an organisation? What do you want to, see from us? And what's really sort of the essential, important bit about the organisation? And everybody said, well, it's your work in relationships. It's that. So we're originally the Church of England Marriage Guidance Council 75 years ago, and have changed our names a couple of times in between. But it was really about the relationship.
So you're a faith-based organisation?
Yes, yes.
I didn't realise that.
We originally, yes, yeah. And we've got kind of loose ties with the Anglican Church. We campaigned in favour of marriage equality, and they weren't too upset about that. So we've got a fair bit of independence. We can do as we wish. And thus, obviously, Rainbow Tick accreditation as well. So, that whole process was really about getting back to our roots and saying, well, what are we and who are we and what's important about who we are and the work that we do. And it's, relationship counselling, mediation services, supporting people to be better parents, good parents, stay together or break up nicely. All of that sort of work is the work that we do.
I think one of the things that's changed over the years, Janet, a lot is, people I think are more prepared and understand better that, coming to an organisation like Relationship Matters and, having a discussion, seeking, some advice or, a listening post, that people I think are much more prepared to do this now than they have been in the past. That, it was always, you just need to get on with it, don't worry about it, it'll be right. Whereas now, I think people acknowledge that they do need to engage, and, engaging an organisation and people that are independent is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think our, the nature of our relationships have changed, how we relate has changed, but also the research is really clear. If you get help early, then you can prevent the cost and the emotional fallout. And believe me, I'm speaking from experience. In that relationship,
I think we've all been there. We've all been there.
The relationship breakdown, it works. Relationship counselling works, but only if you get in early, and so and start to sort out some of those issues. And the other thing is, it also prevents us making the same mistakes relationship after relationship.
Now, talk to us about the Rainbow accreditation.
Sure.
Tell us why you did that.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it, really, that we should be providing...
Well, to you and I it is.
We should be providing services for all of our community. We've actually had a number of CEOs, including myself, who've been lesbians over the last sort of 2 or 3 decades. And so we've always been an organisation that's had a fairly good proportion of members of the LGBTIQ community on our staff as counsellors as well, and we've always done a bit of work in that space. But I think that the nature of our community has changed. Certainly through marriage equality, the sorts of experience that, it kind of took us back really in some ways in terms of the sort of discrimination we were experiencing. And people have also been saying in our communities, LGBTIQ communities, that we want to see services that are both LGBTIQ community controlled, like Thorn Harbour Health, and organisations or services that are mainstream services that are competent in working with our communities. And so that's why Rainbow Tick is really, really important for us. It actually, it's a process that an organisation goes through from the board all the way through to the direct service delivery and our websites and our marketing and the whole of the organisation gets looked at, and plans are put in place to continuously make those organisations more and more accessible to all of our community.
What are the costs involved? We
receive Commonwealth Government funding for almost all of our services, and so people can access them, and what they pay depends on their income. So if you're very high income, you'll pay the full cost of the service. Yep. So it could be $100 for a counselling service. But if you have no income, then it can be as little as $10, $20, depending on, it can be a lot less. Or if you're in hardship or you have no income or you're a refugee or a new arrival or whatever, then I can waive the cost entirely. So it's on a sliding scale, and no one should be not allowed to access services because they can't afford it.
You should not be able to access because you don't have any money.
No, that's right. But we can serve a lot more people by people who can afford it being asked to pay for the full cost of the service.
What sort of number of people, both providing the counselling, and just give us a rough number in terms of the number of clients that the organisation will see annually?
We have about 25,000 service events, so counselling hours a year, and across all of our program areas there's about 6,000 clients a year.
And you have outposts all over the state as well.
So we've got 3, what I would call 3 main offices. So one in Frankston, which is also a fairly large LGBTIQ community in Frankston and that surrounding area, Mount Martha and Mount Eliza and up that way. And then also another main office in Wyndham and here in the CBD. And then we've got what I call satellite sites in Geelong, Wangaratta, Preston, Moonee Ponds, around Prahran, Glen Ira, all over the place.
has a long tradition of Christian persecution of homosexual people. But in fact, there's also a counter-tradition where Christian churches welcomed homosexual people. Christian voices were extremely diverse, so we can see an example of this standing here at St Peter's, Eastern Hill in Melbourne. It was a church that welcomed homosexual people at least as far back as the 1940s, 1950s, and probably earlier. St Peter's, Eastern Hill adhered to one of the three traditions within Anglicanism, the one known as Anglo-Catholicism, which is mostly recognised by people for extreme flamboyance, incense, vestments, the high mass, very different to the kind of low Anglicanism, which was much more austere. In most Australian cities, there was one Anglican church, usually Anglo-Catholic, that was welcoming of homosexual people. Sydney, of course, had two, Christchurch St Lawrence and St James. Adelaide had St Mary's. In Brisbane, it was All Saints on Twickenham Terrace. In Melbourne, it was St Peter's, Eastern Hill. The vicar at St Peter's from 1926 to 1924 was Farnham Maynard, and he was known for his radical approach to questions such as poverty and the role of the church in the community. He was also, and this was less publicly known, very accepting, or at least tolerant, of homosexuals, who did indeed gather at his church during this period. His social and political radicalism led him to a position of tolerance for homosexuality, and he wrote about this to one of his colleagues in 1950, talking about homosexuality as a problem, but recognising that it involved both women and men, which was a bit unusual at the time, and also not as a problem to be eradicated or to be persecuted, but rather to be understood and to be dealt with. For Maynard, homosexuals were also God's children, and this put upon the church a responsibility to treat them respectfully. He recognised that many homosexuals were in fact damaged. He talked about the way in which they might be mentally queer, with no normal sense of right or wrong, but he didn't apply this to everybody. Some indeed he described as very lovable, and he went out of his way to make those people welcome in his church. The fact that homosexuals were often attracted to this high church tradition, the kind of flamboyance, indeed we might think a certain campness, is often said to be one of the reasons why homosexuals were attracted to it. But actually, in many ways, homosexuals were attracted because of the acceptance and the tolerance that those church traditions offered, and it was an important part of homosexual life through the 40s, 50s, going back to the 19th century and coming up to the present day.
Isn't it fascinating that, there are churches back in the 50s and 60s that were still very supportive of the LGBTIQ movement, and we still have those churches today, and we just seem not to get a consistent approach. It's down to people, I guess.
People being just humanitarian, really, and some aren't.
And respectful to others.
Absolutely.
But there you go. More from QTV next week. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll be back for more next time. Take care.